The guard almost threw it away. It was just a folded letter from a federal inmate. Nothing fancy, no name on the front, no threat in sight, but something about it smelled strange, kind of like cleaning fluid mixed with metal. He held it near the desk lamp, and that's when the words slowly appeared like ghosts on paper. It read, "War with DC Blacks, TD." The air in that room froze up instantly because everyone working at ADX Florence knew those initials. Tyler Bingham, the Hulk, the Commissioner of Death. When his name showed up, it never meant peace. It meant somebody somewhere was about to bleed. Tyler Davis Bingham was born in California back in 1947, but not much about his early life ever made it into public record. Some say he came from a quiet neighborhood where violence waited behind closed doors. Others claim he was half Jewish, and that made him a target in rougher circles. Either way, the boy learned quick that standing still meant getting stepped on. California back then was like a powder keg, waiting on a spark. The 1960s hit, and everything around him felt like it was boiling over. You had the Watts riots, racial lines splitting whole blocks apart, cops running through streets with batons, and prisons already jammed past their limits. Young Tyler grew up watching biker clubs roll through town, their leather jackets stitched with skulls and lightning bolts. He saw power in that kind of brotherhood. In those bars and pool halls, the rules were simple. Hit first, talk later. Folks who met him in those days said he was quiet but carried a kind of pressure that made others step aside. He worked out heavy, kept his hair tight, and carried himself like a man ready for anything. Some said he had the strength of a bull and the patience of a trap waiting to snap. That mix drew in trouble fast. He drifted between biker hangouts and hustlers, learning how to move money, muscle, and silence all at once. By the late 60s, he started catching cases: robbery, grand theft auto, parole violations. Small at first, but steady. The courts gave him chances, but prison doors became familiar real quick. Each time he went in, he came out colder and heavier, with muscle and rage. Juvenile halls and state yards became classrooms where violence was the teacher. The state tried to rehabilitate him, but California's system was already breaking under its own weight. Those years taught him two things. Loyalty kept you breathing, and fear made people listen. The inside world was like another country. Gangs controlled who ate, who showered, and who walked the yard without catching a blade to the ribs. Young Bingham studied that world like a blueprint. He didn't talk much, but he paid attention to who ran things and who folded when pressure came. The prison system of California in the late 60s wasn't about correction anymore. It was about survival. The Mexican mafia ran their corners. The black guerrilla family moved like an army. White inmates had no flag to stand behind yet, just scattered groups with old school biker roots or southern pride. Inside that chaos, Tyler found a purpose that made sense. If you couldn't run the streets, you could rule the cages. The rules were clear. Nobody gives respect, you take it. That seed grew into something darker the more time he served. By the time the 70s rolled in, California's prisons were about to witness one of the bloodiest reorganizations in history. Bingham didn't start it, but he walked into the storm just when it needed another soldier. That's where he met men who believed in turning white rage into a structure. And that's where the name Aryan Brotherhood began whispering through the cell blocks. San Quentin in the late 60s was a world built on violence and color. Every block was divided by race, and walking on the wrong side of the yard could get you buried by sundown. The black guerrilla family had formed under George Jackson's revolutionary ideas. The Mexican mafia ran with Laim tattoos, and the white inmates were tired of being the ones caught in the middle. Somewhere between 1964 and 1967, a few white convicts decided to build their own flag. They called it the Aryan Brotherhood. At first, it wasn't about business or ideology. It was survival mixed with hate, a way to make sure white inmates didn't get wiped out in the racial wars burning through the California system. The founding names were men like Barry Mills, John Stinson, and others who carried swastikas on their skin and cold codes in their heads. They took symbols from Viking myths and Nazi history, twisting them into something that promised power behind bars. Inside San Quentin, guards noticed how this new group operated different. They didn't brawl without reason. Every move looked calculated. Every hit had a message. The first real test came after an inmate named Wallace Holderman was stabbed to death in a fight between groups. That killing wasn't random. It became the foundation stone of what the Aryan Brotherhood called blood in, blood out. Once you joined, the only way out was death. The yard at San Quentin looked like a battlefield pretending to be a prison. The guards fed the violence by separating races and letting tension grow. Rumor says the administration allowed white gangs to rise as a counterbalance to the black guerrilla family's political energy. Whether that was true or not, It worked. The Aryan Brotherhood grew fast, pulling in bikers, lifers, and ex-soldiers who needed belonging more than freedom. Members branded themselves with the shamrock tattoo, sometimes drawn with the swastika in the leaves. They called it the brand. It wasn't about pride anymore, it was about control. When the guards locked the yard down, they found coded notes under bunks and crude maps carved into walls showing who owned which tier. Every killing added to their credibility, and soon the group spread from San Quentin to Folsom, Soledad, and beyond. The early AB didn't just kill enemies, they made examples. They called it demonstration killings. A single hit could change the mood of an entire block. When a man refused to pay drug debts, they didn't argue. They waited until he stepped out for chow and left him bleeding by the laundry gate. The message was simple: nobody disrespects the brand. Guards kept finding homemade knives shaped from metal lunch trays and typewriter parts. They confiscated letters written in pencil that turned out to be coded orders. Inside every facility, the Aryan Brotherhood started setting up ranks: generals, lieutenants, soldiers, and prospects. The soldiers handled the dirty work. The generals handled politics and money. By the early 70s, the Brotherhood had already gained power far beyond San Quentin's walls. They had alliances with biker gangs outside, connections in Nevada and Arizona prisons, and a growing myth built on fear. Even the guards started whispering their name carefully, because snitching on them meant ending up in a cell with your throat open. The ideology started shifting from race to revenue. Drugs became currency. Protection became business. The Brotherhood began taxing weaker inmates for security and running gambling rings behind every wall. Racism stayed the outer layer, but profit became the real motivation. This was the world Tyler Bingham was walking into. When he finally got transferred into the system that housed these men, he didn't walk in like a recruit. He walked in like someone who understood power already. He saw the tattoos, the discipline, the silence, and he knew this wasn't just a gang. It was a machine built to outlast every warden and every lockdown. The brand had rules that matched his mindset: loyalty, violence, silence, and money. Inside those walls, he found something that gave his life a direction. The man who came in as another California convict was about to rise through the ranks of one of the most feared prison empires in American history. And soon enough, every letter that left his cell would carry more weight than bullets. By the early 70s, Tyler Bingham was already known in California's system for his calm and violence sitting side by side. When he finally got moved into federal custody, the scene around him shifted completely. Leavenworth wasn't a regular yard filled with petty hustlers. It was a cold arena packed with killers, lifers, and political militants who lived by their own codes. Bingham touched down there carrying muscle, silence, and a look that told everyone he wasn't scared of dying. In that world, your body language spoke louder than your words. The man started hitting the weights every single day, benching more than anyone on the range. Guards used to stop and stare because his size looked unreal. The name the Hulk stuck around quick, and even men with murder raps stayed cautious when he walked by. He never bragged, he never smiled much, and he always moved with purpose, like somebody clocking every second of a sentence. Inmates said he spent his nights reading anatomy books that came from the prison library. He studied where muscles and arteries sat, learning exactly how deep a blade should go. Some old-timers said he once practiced stabbing techniques using rolled-up towels soaked with red dye, perfecting every motion until it looked like routine. Whether that was true or not, it fit the image that followed him everywhere. Inside Leavenworth, he crossed paths with men who were already building their own legend. One was Barry Mills, a tall red-haired convict who everyone called the Red Baron. Another was Al Benton, better known as Big Al, a calm talker with a dangerous temper. Those three men understood something most others didn't. They knew that fear could organize people better than politics ever could. At first, the Aryan Brotherhood was still wild and loose, like a gang chasing pride more than power. Bingham saw potential in that chaos. Mills had vision, Benton had contacts, and Bingham had discipline backed by raw strength. Together, they started reshaping how the brand moved behind bars. His first real test came with a man named Arva Lee Ray. Ray was an older member who started running his mouth, questioning orders, and ignoring debts. In that environment, showing weakness meant everyone else would follow. The Brotherhood decided to make an example. They handed the job to Bingham. The hit went down inside the yard near the laundry entrance. Witnesses later said Ray got cornered by two men while Bingham handled the finishing move himself. Ray was stabbed multiple times before collapsing. His body left where it fell. That murder locked Bingham's place inside the Brotherhood for good. It was his blood-in moment, the kind of act you couldn't walk back from even if you tried. After that, everyone understood his position. He wasn't just muscle. He was the type who followed orders exactly how they came and expected the same in return. Prison staff started linking his name to nearly every incident that carried discipline behind it. If someone refused to pay a drug debt, Bingham showed up with quiet efficiency. If someone lied about business, their cell got visited at night. Through the late 70s, he and Mills began planting seeds that reached beyond a single facility. They used visiting wives and girlfriends to move coded messages between prisons. They traded information about guards, contraband, and possible alliances with other groups. It wasn't about race alone anymore. It was about building a system that could outlive any lockdown. Each transfer only expanded their network. When Bingham got sent to Marion Federal Penitentiary after Leavenworth, his legend moved with him. Marion was worse than any state yard, a place where silence replaced air and survival turned men into machines. That's where the myth of the Hulk fully formed. The way he trained his body turned into ritual. The way he managed his crew became military. His orders never came loud, only whispered, and they always got done. By the end of that decade, his name had weight across every federal tier. Barry Mills handled the politics. Al Benton kept business smooth, and Bingham enforced everything with quiet violence. The trio wasn't just surviving anymore. They were preparing to run the system from inside its own cage. By the early 80s, the Aryan Brotherhood had turned into something way bigger than a racial prison gang. The structure looked almost corporate, and every move felt like a boardroom decision that written in blood. Barry Mills, Tyler Bingham, and Al Benton sat at the top of what they called the Commission. They didn't call themselves bosses out loud, but everyone knew those three names carried final say. Their plan was simple: turn chaos into control. The Commission handled everything from who got greenlit for a hit to how profits were split from heroin sales inside the system. Orders traveled through coded notes, trusted couriers, and hidden channels that most guards never understood. It was an empire built out of scraps of paper, whispers, and loyalty. Each federal prison had a small circle of soldiers who reported up the chain. Information flowed like water between Leavenworth, Marion, and Lewisburg. A coded message from one cell could reach another state in days. When a brother got transferred, he didn't lose power. He became another link in the network. Communication inside those walls needed creativity. Some used what they called toilet phones. They drained water out of the toilet bowl, yelled through the pipes, and the sound carried across cell blocks. Others wrote letters in invisible ink made from urine or lemon juice, letting the message appear only under heat. Bingham himself was known for using short phrases like, "It's a boy" or "It's a girl," to signal assassinations. Each phrase carried a number code. 187 meant murder, 211 meant robbery. Mills played the strategist role, always thinking about how to expand without breaking the code of silence. Benton moved like a diplomat, managing money through relatives and contacts outside the walls. Bingham stayed the muscle behind every decision, the one who enforced the rules nobody dared to test. If someone questioned orders, Bingham's message came down like a hammer. "You earn your patch with blood," he told younger members through notes passed under food trays. The words echoed through tears because everyone knew they were true. Violence was both message and method. One incident that spread his name even further happened in Marion. A small crew refused to pay taxes from gambling profits. Within a week, one of their members was found stabbed multiple times in the shower. No witness, no sound, no names. Guards later found the same numeric code scratched on his locker, 187. Everyone got the message. The Commission didn't just handle murder, they handled profit. They taxed drugs coming through mail packages, controlled the flow of contraband, and even decided which prison gangs could do business on their turf. By the mid-80s, the Aryan Brotherhood was pulling profit like a syndicate. The Mexican Mafia worked with them on distribution, and biker gangs on the outside laundered money through fake construction jobs. Within the Bureau of Prisons, investigators started realizing they weren't dealing with the street thugs anymore. They were looking at a criminal organization operating across multiple states with its own written constitution. The FBI later described it as the most organized violent enterprise ever built behind bars. Bingham loved order almost as much as he loved control. Every soldier had a role. Every debt had a timer. If a brother broke protocol, the punishment came swift. He once wrote in a confiscated letter, "Honors earned with actions, not talk." That line became a quote among younger inmates trying to impress the higher ranks. Inside Leavenworth, some officers used to whisper that Bingham carried himself like a general in a never-ending war. He rarely raised his voice, but had a presence that froze people in their tracks. One officer later testified that Bingham looked like he was made of stone. His reputation was pure intimidation wrapped in discipline. The communication methods got smarter with time. Some brothers hid codes inside Bible verses, using chapter and verse numbers to line up with letters. Others mailed out drawings of babies or snakes that looked innocent, but contained assassination commands when decoded by the right people. Every single piece of mail carried layers of meaning, and Bingham oversaw that system like an accountant of death. As the structure grew, so did his legend. Within prison walls, stories circulated about a man who didn't need to yell to make people move. Guards claimed he could read the whole yard without leaving his cell. New recruits whispered about how he killed with surgical precision and planned operations with military timing. Those tales shaped his image as the Commissioner of Death, a nickname born from respect and fear at the same time. By the late 80s, the Brotherhood operated like a silent government controlling pieces of every major federal yard. Leavenworth reported to Marion spoke to Lewisburg, and Lewisburg fed information back to the commission. If someone wanted protection, they paid. If they wanted revenge, they applied. The system functioned like clockwork because Bingham made sure loyalty stayed tighter than chains. He built that network not with noise but with patience. He understood time moved differently inside prison walls, and he used every minute to tighten control. For him, violence was just business, and silence was policy. By the time most wardens realized what he and Mills had built, the Brotherhood already owned more power than any correctional officer could break. Behind those locked doors, the Hulk didn't just survive, he thrived. He turned confinement into command. Every coded message, every secret order, every hidden call built the structure that made the Aryan Brotherhood the deadliest organization in federal custody. And while others counted days, Tyler Bingham was counting moves, setting up a future empire ready to spill blood without ever leaving a cell. By the start of the 80s, the Aryan Brotherhood already had control over entire tiers in federal prisons. The name alone could freeze a yard. To earn that kind of fear, they used something called demonstration killings. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about sending a message that every inmate could see and remember. New recruits were taught that blood was the only real language that mattered inside those walls. One of the most infamous examples happened at Marion Federal Penitentiary. A member of the DC Blacks, a rival prison group, got targeted for disrespecting an Aryan Brotherhood soldier. The attack was pure theater and pure terror. Two AB members cornered him during tear movement and started stabbing relentlessly. Witnesses later said the count hit 67 wounds before the man dropped lifeless. They didn't stop even after he fell. They wanted everyone watching through the doors to see what defiance cost. That's what a demonstration killing meant. It was violence used as a classroom. Former Aryan Brotherhood member Michael Thompson later told investigators that initiation was never about words or loyalty oaths. He said new members had to prove their commitment by taking life for the gang. Thompson described it coldly, saying, "You kill for the brand or you die for refusing." Those words became legend inside the walls. It was that kind of creed that shaped the next generation of soldiers who would follow Bingham and Mills. Another case that showed their brutality involved a white inmate named Neil Baumgarten. He wasn't an enemy. He was one of their own who broke the code. Reports say Baumgarten owed another member $57 in drug money, just a few stamps worth of dope. In normal life, that amount was nothing, but inside it meant everything. The Brotherhood ordered a hit to show what disrespect looked like. Baumgarten was ambushed near the showers, stabbed multiple times, and left bleeding in a pool of his own blood. Guards found a small piece of paper tucked under his mattress with the number 57 written in pencil. That wasn't coincidence. That was the price of his debt. Those murders built a reputation that spread like smoke. Federal agents began calling the Aryan Brotherhood the most feared group in American prisons. The violence became ritualized. It wasn't wild or emotional. It was structured, practiced, and cold. Every kill meant advancement. Every act of bloodshed meant loyalty tested and proven. Then came 1983, the year that locked the Brotherhood into American prison history forever. Marion Penitentiary was supposed to be the most secure federal prison in the country after Alcatraz closed. But that year, two Aryan Brotherhood members, Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, changed the meaning of control inside federal custody. Silverstein killed correctional officer Merle Klutz during a routine escort. The attack was fast and brutal. Klutz was stabbed multiple times with a homemade shank. Just hours later, Fountain murdered another guard named Robert Hoffman the same way. The killings shocked the Bureau of Prisons to its core. No one had ever seen guards executed like that inside a high-security facility. Silverstein and Fountain became legends among the Brotherhood, symbols of defiance against what they saw as an oppressive system. Tyler Bingham respected what they did. He saw it as proof that one man could still control fear even when locked behind steel doors. He studied their methods, not just the violence, but the silence afterward. Both men refused to cooperate, refused to talk, and accepted solitary like warriors in a self-made hell. Bingham's admiration wasn't about hero worship, it was about discipline. He saw how Silverstein used patience like a weapon, how Fountain controlled chaos with calm, Those lessons became part of how Bingham ran his own soldiers later. He didn't just order hits, he studied the rhythm of power inside confinement. The Marion murders forced the government to rethink prison security altogether. That event directly led to the design and construction of ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies. It was built specifically to cage men like Bingham, Mills, Silverstein, and others who thrived inside chaos. Every detail of that facility came from the fear born at Marion in 1983. The walls, the electronic doors, the isolation pods, all of it was built to stop another uprising. But that new cage didn't stop what was already forming. The Aryan Brotherhood had evolved into something even the Bureau couldn't contain. Their violence had become religion, and their communication ran deeper than the walls could block. Behind every stabbing and coded note sat a philosophy that turned murder into order. To Bingham, control meant discipline, and discipline meant survival. Inside that cold logic, he found the structure that would make him one of the most dangerous men the system ever produced. After the blood years of the early 80s, the Aryan Brotherhood settled into a rhythm that looked almost like government. Between 1985 and the mid-90s, they became a system more than a gang. Tyler Bingham now held power that reached across state lines, even though he hadn't walked free in decades. He was locked in Marion at first, then moved to other federal joints, but his influence kept expanding. Bingham ran operations through coded letters that traveled between prisons. Every message carried both orders and updates. The Brotherhood called them kites. Each kite passed through layers of loyal inmates until it reached its target. Those letters controlled everything: drug deals, protection agreements, and even assassinations. Nothing happened without a paper trail written in code. To manage money, they built what members called banks. These weren't real banks, just outside accounts controlled by girlfriends, wives, and allies. Biker clubs like the Hells Angels helped clean dirty money. Street dealers moved product on the outside, and the profits came back inside through phone accounts and commissary drops. Every dollar fed the machine. The Aryan Brotherhood didn't move alone. They built relationships with other criminal groups that shared the same goals. The Mexican Mafia worked with them for distribution networks. The Hells Angels helped them smuggle drugs across states. There were even stories of distant coordination with the Gambino family in the late 80s. According to FBI files, John Gotti's people respected the Brotherhood's control over prison territory and occasionally cut deals for protection of mob members doing time. Inside, the Brotherhood treated the prison population like a marketplace. They taxed inmates who sold drugs or ran hustles under their watch. Refusing to pay meant punishment that usually ended with hospitalization. They also forced addiction on certain inmates, using drugs as control tools. A man hooked on heroin or meth had to keep paying for his fix, which meant steady income for the brand. Violence didn't stop, but it got more calculated. Beatings replaced random killings. Threats replaced riots. Bingham called it business before blood, according to one informant. His version of power didn't need screaming, it needed consistency. Everyone who dealt with him said the same thing. He was polite, measured, and emotionless. That's what made him more dangerous. Rumor says Bingham kept a long correspondence with a woman outside during those years. The letters, some intercepted by the Bureau, showed glimpses of how he thought. He wrote about order, loyalty, and fate. In one, he allegedly said, "I'm already free in my mind because I control everything that touches me." That kind of sentence told you what kind of man he was. Isolation didn't break him, it focused him. Under Bingham's guidance, the Brotherhood's operations reached every major federal facility: Lewisburg, Lompoc, Atlanta, and Florence. Every warden knew the name, and every prison gang respected or feared it. Soldiers communicated with coded phone calls, sometimes pretending to talk about family, but really trading numbers for shipments or hits. Money flowed from drugs and gambling, but also from protection rackets. Some inmates paid monthly just to stay alive. Others worked as mules, carrying messages between tiers or mailing letters that contained invisible ink. Bingham handled all of it like an accountant with blood on his books. By the early 90s, the Brotherhood had evolved into a true organization. Bingham was the enforcer, Mills was the strategist, and Benton worked as mediator when disputes arose. But even that partnership carried tension. Benton's more diplomatic style didn't always match Bingham's strict order. Mills preferred chaos when it served power, while Bingham preferred precision. Small cracks started showing, mostly in how they handled money and recruitment. Still, their control never weakened. When new inmates came in, the guards could almost predict who would fall under the brand. The gang's reputation was too big to resist. A single tattoo of the shamrock carried weight heavier than a life sentence. Bingham became something like a bureaucrat of violence. He stopped being a frontline soldier and started acting like a manager whose job was maintaining systems. Each coded message, each transaction, each hit had to be approved through the chain. He transformed brutality into business, and chaos into balance. He was no longer just a killer. He was a builder of a nation that lived inside the walls of another. By the time the mid-90s came around, the Bureau of Prisons had no clue how deep the roots went. Bingham and Mills had connected networks across states and even different races for profit. The Brotherhood still carried its white supremacist image, but its real loyalty was to power and money. Behind the slogans, they moved like any other cartel. That system of blood and currency kept Bingham's legend alive through every transfer and lockdown. Guards knew his name but couldn't trace his hand. He ruled through paper, whispers, and fear. The same discipline he learned from Silverstein's example had now turned him into the quiet general of the federal underworld. And by the late 90s, that underworld was about to explode in a war that would make his coded messages look like declarations of battle written in invisible ink. By the late 90s, the tension inside the federal prison system felt like dry wood waiting for a spark. The Aryan Brotherhood had been stacking power for years, and every other group felt the pressure. The DC Blacks were their main rivals, a coalition of inmates from Washington, D.C., known for unity and retaliation. The balance between both sides had held fragile for years, but small fights in Marion and Lewisburg started breaking that quiet. It began with what the reports called isolated altercations. To anyone inside, it looked like warm-up drills. 2 Aryan Brotherhood members got jumped near the showers in Marion. A few weeks later, another one got sliced across the face in the Lewisburg yard. Rumors said the DC Blacks were testing the brand, seeing if they would retaliate or hold the line. They didn't have to wait long. Names started flying through the prison grapevine. Dave Sahakian and Michael McElhiney, both respected Aryan Brotherhood soldiers, got marked for death. Someone said the DC Blacks put money on their heads, and those words reached the top fast. Barry Mills, who ran things alongside Bingham, received word and immediately knew what it meant. You don't threaten 2 patched members without paying the price. Mills sent a coded message straight to ADX Florence, where Bingham was locked in near total isolation. The message read, "The Toads put a hit on Dave and Mac. The war is on." The word Toads was the Brotherhood's slang for DC Blacks, meant as insult and code at once. Bingham read that message, stared at it for a while, and then decided to make a move that would change everything. Inside ADX Florence, communication wasn't supposed to exist. Every inmate stayed behind thick glass, isolated 23 hours a day, and every letter got screened. But Bingham had ways. He wrote his orders using invisible ink made from ammonia and lemon juice, a method he learned from older convicts. The message didn't show under regular light, only under heat. It was short and clean. War with DC Blacks, TD. He signed it with his initials like always, knowing anyone who saw them would understand. The letter smelled faintly chemical, just enough to throw off suspicion from prison mail handlers. It moved through hidden channels, passed by inmates working in the mailroom, then slipped into the hands of an outside contact before landing in another federal yard. Once it reached its destination, a soldier on the outside heated it gently near a lamp, revealing the words. Then he recopied it into another note disguised as a family letter, sending it back inside another facility. That was how war traveled behind steel and concrete. Bingham didn't need to shout or even leave his cell. His decision crossed the country like smoke through vents. A few days later, another coded message left Florence. This one carried the phrase, 8 pounds 7 ounces baby boy. To regular people, it sounded like a proud father sharing good news. To the Aryan Brotherhood, it meant authorization granted. A hit was approved, and blood was expected to follow. The code went through Leavenworth, Marion, and finally Lewisburg, the next stage of the game. Inside those walls, men started sharpening blades, collecting small razors, and wrapping strings around shanks for grip. Each piece of metal got filed down to surgical precision. The targets were already known. Abdul Salam and Frank Joyner, both high-ranking members of the DC Blacks, had been disrespecting the Brotherhood for months. The order was clear. Retaliate hard. Send a message nobody could forget. The war had been declared in a single sentence written with invisible ink, and the man who sent it didn't even raise his voice. The Commissioner of Death had spoken. The federal system just didn't know it yet. August 28, 1997, started like any other day inside Lewisburg Penitentiary. Breakfast came early, the same powdered eggs and cold toast routine. Inmates walked slow through the corridors, talking about sports and commissary shipments. Nothing in the air felt strange, but under that calm surface, something deadly was waiting to unfold. By noon, 4 Aryan Brotherhood soldiers were already in position. 2 of them, Wayne Bridgewater and Jason Schweihart, had one mission. Their target was Frank Joyner, a respected DC Black shot caller known for his leadership and his temper. On the other side of the tier, Henry Houston and another AB soldier had eyes on Abdul Salam, another DC Blacks leader who held influence in both Lewisburg and Allenwood. The plan was simple and brutal. Each pair would attack separately, but within seconds of each other, creating maximum confusion for guards. It was a coordinated strike written in silence weeks before. Everything had been arranged through coded notes and whispers in the yard. Around 1 in the afternoon, the first attack went down. Bridgewater and Schweihart were sitting near the common area, pretending to play Monopoly. That game was their camouflage. The board spread out neatly across the table, small paper cash scattered around. Joyner sat nearby, not paying attention. When the timing hit, Bridgewater reached under the board and pulled out a handmade knife wrapped in tape. He lunged across the table before anyone could react. The first stab caught Joyner near the chest, the second in the side. Schweihart followed with his own blade, striking fast while guards froze in shock. Within seconds, the sound of alarms filled the air. Inmates ran toward cell doors, yelling as the attack continued. Joyner tried to fight back, but he was already bleeding heavy. Reports later said he took more than 30 wounds before collapsing, while chaos exploded in that block. The second attack erupted just down the tier. Henry Houston and his partner approached Abdul Salam, who was sitting near the television area. They moved fast and quiet, stabbing repeatedly until blood splattered across the wall. Salam fell to the floor clutching his side, and one of the attackers kept swinging until his blade broke. Another DC Blacks member, Byron Ball, tried to jump in to stop it, but Houston turned on him immediately. Ball got hit several times, badly wounded, but somehow managed to crawl away before guards slammed through the door. In less than 2 minutes, 2 men were dead, and one was fighting for his life. Al Benton, one of the Commission's oldest allies, was in Lewisburg that day. He later testified that he heard the chaos from his cell. He knew what it was the second he heard the screams. He said, "You could tell it was business, not rage." The hits were clean, controlled, and precise. He didn't see the stabbing, but he saw the aftermath when guards dragged bodies across the tier. Blood streaked the floor from one cell door to the next. The scene looked like a riot, but it wasn't. It was a calculated execution carried out under Bingham's invisible command. The coded phrase, 8 pounds 7 ounces baby boy, had reached Lewisburg 2 weeks earlier. Everyone who read it knew what it meant. The green light was real. When guards flooded the block, they had no idea who to grab first. Alarms kept echoing through concrete halls. Smoke grenades filled the corridor as officers shouted orders. The bodies of Joyner and Salam lay still, while Bridgewater and Houston stood covered in blood, their hands raised calmly. They didn't resist. They didn't speak. They just waited to be cuffed. Bridgewater later told investigators that it was his graduation. The Brotherhood promoted him to a full member that same day. Henry Houston earned the same honor. Both became living proof of what a baby boy order meant. Each act of violence was ritual, and every kill came with promotion. Al Benton, who had followed the Brotherhood since its early days, said he felt sick after seeing what came next. He realized how far the system had gone. It wasn't about protecting territory anymore. It was about maintaining fear and power through sacrifice. He said he saw the guards shaking while cleaning the blood, and he knew the Bureau would strike back eventually. After the massacre, Lewisburg went into immediate lockdown. Every inmate was searched, every piece of paper confiscated. Investigators found coded notes, gang rosters, and lists of targets. One paper contained numbers that matched the dates of the killings. They also found references to the baby boy, linking it back to Bingham. The trail was faint but visible. Within hours, federal officials moved to isolate suspected members. Bridgewater and Houston got transferred to solitary. Bingham, still at ADX Florence, didn't say a word when questioned later. He just looked at the agents and said, "You already know what time it is." That line became infamous in reports. The Lewisburg killings hit national news as one of the deadliest coordinated murders inside the federal system. The Bureau of Prisons called it the turning point. Internal memos warned that the Aryan Brotherhood had grown beyond prison control. Every yard in America went on high alert. For the next several weeks, movement stopped in facilities tied to either group. Byron Ball survived, but he carried scars across his stomach and shoulder for the rest of his life. He refused to testify, saying, "We handle our own business." That silence protected the Brotherhood's structure even as investigators pieced together how the orders moved. Years later, during the RICO trials, prosecutors showed the letters that started it all. They showed the phrase, "War with DC Blacks, TD," written in invisible ink. They showed the baby code and traced its path through at least 3 prisons. They called it the most complex prison communication system ever documented. The massacre's aftermath stretched far beyond those 2 dead men. It exposed how deeply connected the Brotherhood's network was. Bingham didn't touch a weapon that year, but his words killed more efficiently than knives. His message moved across walls, through pipes, across state lines, and into the hands of men willing to die for his command. After that day, guards began referring to the incident as the baby boy hit. Every officer in Lewisburg knew that phrase. It meant a coded birth that delivered only death. Inside ADX Florence, Bingham received word through whispers passed during shower rotations. His order had been carried out perfectly. He didn't celebrate or speak about it. He simply wrote another small note, folded tight, and passed it down the system. The note only said, "It's handled." No name, no threat, just closure. That was his style. Every war started with ink and ended with silence. When investigators pieced the events together, they realized they were dealing with a structure that worked like an army inside concrete fortresses. The Lewisburg massacre wasn't an isolated hit. It was the proof that the Aryan Brotherhood had turned into a shadow government ruling by death orders and coded births. By the time the lockdown lifted months later, the entire prison system had changed. Every movement got watched, every letter got screened twice, and every guard knew that somewhere inside those walls, Tyler the Hulk Bingham was still pulling strings with nothing but paper, patience, and a pen that could start wars no one could stop. The Lewisburg killings ripped through the federal system like a hurricane. Within days, every major penitentiary in the country went on full lockdown. Guards stopped movement, cut mail flow, and stripped cells down to concrete and metal. The Bureau of Prisons called it a national emergency. But inside those cells, the Aryan Brotherhood didn't flinch. The silence that followed wasn't surrender. It was organization. They knew the storm was coming, and they already had their stories straight. Federal investigators started connecting the dots immediately. The coded letters, the timing, the targets, it all pointed to the same men who had been quietly pulling strings for years. Barry Mills, Tyler Bingham, and Al Benton. The Commission. Every prison intelligence unit began building charts linking their names to dozens of murders across the system. For the first time, the government treated them not as inmates, but as leaders of a criminal enterprise. What the feds didn't know yet was that cracks had already started forming inside the Brotherhood's top tier. Al Benton, the man who had once helped organize the commission, began feeling the weight of betrayal. He started realizing that both Mills and Bingham had set him up as a scapegoat after Lewisburg. Word reached him that his name had been used in letters he never wrote, orders he never approved. When agents came knocking, he saw a choice: die with the Brotherhood or live with the truth. Benton flipped. His decision came quietly, with no announcement and no warning. In exchange for protection, he told federal prosecutors everything he knew. He described the commission's structure, the codes they used, and how the invisible letters moved from prison to prison. He drew diagrams showing how "it's a boy" meant murder, how "it's a girl" meant no action, and how the numeric codes aligned with targets. It was the first time the government truly understood the scale of the Brotherhood's communication network. His testimony became the blueprint for the biggest federal prison case ever built. Prosecutors began piecing together thousands of pages of intercepted mail, confiscated notes, and forensic ink tests. They discovered urine ink letters, coded Bibles, and hidden messages inside greeting cards. Every fragment pointed back to the same chain of command. Inside ADX Florence, Bingham didn't deny his reputation. According to one inmate, he bragged openly saying, "I gave the order." He said it like a man proud of his craftsmanship. To him, the Lewisburg massacre wasn't chaos, it was control. Even behind layers of concrete, he carried himself like the same general who once managed an army of killers through whispers. The FBI's Operation Shot Caller started in late 1998, pulling agents from multiple states. They traced letters through outside girlfriends, compared handwriting, and reconstructed entire command threads using data from seized mail. Detectives even used heat lamps to recover faded words written in invisible ink. Slowly, the picture came together. Every detail Benton provided matched what the Bureau found. His inside knowledge made him their golden witness. It didn't matter that he was a convicted killer. He was the key to translating a language built on death and deception. His words turned myth into evidence. By 2002, the Brotherhood's empire had started to crumble from within. Soldiers were scared to send mail. Outside contacts went silent. The commission no longer felt untouchable. Mills and Bingham still believed they could outthink the feds, but the noose was tightening. The system they built to rule the prisons was now the same system that trapped them. In 2002, the Justice Department announced a massive federal indictment against 40 members of the Aryan Brotherhood. The news spread like wildfire. Reporters called it the most dangerous prison gang case in U.S. history. The charges read like a record of organized war, murder, extortion, racketeering, and conspiracy spanning decades. At the center of it all were Barry Mills and Tyler the Hulk Bingham. The prosecutors framed the case under RICO, the same law used to take down mob bosses in the 70s. They argued that the Aryan Brotherhood wasn't just a gang. It was a continuing criminal enterprise with a defined leadership, structure, and profit motive. The indictment listed multiple murders, including Frank Joyner, Abdul Salam, and Arva Lee Ray. each killing tied directly to coded letters or verbal orders issued by the commission. The government called it the Invisible War. Evidence-filled boxes, letters written in invisible ink, numeric codes scribbled on Bibles, intercepted communications from toilet pipes, and testimony from defectors who had once sat at the same table as Bingham. Every document revealed a system built on discipline, not chaos. Prosecutors presented photos of intercepted letters that looked harmless until heat revealed their messages. They showed jurors coded baby announcements that corresponded to actual murders within weeks. One envelope carried the faint chemical smell of ammonia. Another had small dots of heat damage, where prison mail staff tried to test it. Every piece connected back to ADX Florence and the man who signed his initials as TD. Benton's testimony formed the spine of the case. He walked the court through every step of the Brotherhood's command chain. He explained how decisions came from the commission, how soldiers got orders, and how each killing needed approval. His diagrams, drawn from memory, matched the evidence perfectly. Another witness, former Brotherhood associate T.D. Greshner, backed Benton's claims. He told the jury how Bingham operated with a strict code of silence, always using short messages and indirect phrasing. Greshner said, "He ran it like a business. If someone didn't follow the rules, they disappeared." The defense tried to counter by claiming Bingham's letters weren't death orders, but warnings meant to prevent violence. They argued that war with DC blacks was a way to calm tensions, not ignite them. Their lawyers said the coded phrases were misinterpreted and that witnesses flipped only to save themselves. Prosecutors pushed back hard. They showed the exact timeline of events, matching letters to killings within days. They presented Bingham's handwriting from confiscated notes. They even introduced an intercepted message where he wrote, "War confirmed. No mercy." The jury listened in silence as each exhibit revealed the cold precision behind the words. The courtroom stayed packed for months. Journalists from across the country called it the trial of the Invisible War. The media focused on the mystery of how men locked away in cages could control murders nationwide. The prosecution called it intelligence. The defense called it mythology. During the trial, Bingham sat stone-faced, dressed neatly with his wrists chained beneath the table. He rarely spoke, even when witnesses mentioned his name. One reporter described him as a man who looked like he already knew the outcome. He read documents calmly, sometimes glancing toward Benton, but never reacting. Barry Mills sat beside him, writing notes during testimony. Both men looked more like executives than inmates, which only made the story more chilling. The government said those two had turned federal prisons into a shadow empire. Every word out of their mouths could decide who lived and who died. When closing arguments came, the prosecution described the Aryan Brotherhood as a nation built inside a nation. They said Bingham used coded language to command killers, all while hiding behind walls meant to contain him. The defense said the government was chasing ghosts, trying to criminalize reputation and rumor. In July 2006, after 4 years of hearings and motions, the jury delivered its verdict. Tyler Bingham was found guilty of racketeering, conspiracy, and multiple murders committed under RICO and Vicar statutes. The evidence proved that he gave orders resulting in the deaths of Joyner, Salam, and Arva Lee Ray. Barry Mills received the same judgment. The government sought the death penalty, arguing that their crimes went beyond murder into terrorism within federal custody. But the jury couldn't reach a unanimous decision on execution. After days of deliberation, they sentenced both men to life without parole. When the verdict was read, Bingham didn't move. He sat still, hands folded, eyes fixed forward. Reporters said he looked like a man listening to weather reports, not judgment. One guard later said, "He took it like someone who'd already accepted hell as home." The conviction marked a symbolic victory for the government. For decades, the Brotherhood had ruled prisons through fear, and now its two leaders were officially neutralized. But even as the courtroom emptied, agents whispered that the organization wasn't dead. Letters still moved, orders still traveled. The machine Bingham helped build had learned to run without him. In the years that followed, federal authorities dismantled the Brotherhood's outer networks, seizing assets and isolating high-ranking members in separate facilities. But they could never erase what had already been created. The brand lived in ink, memory, and silence. For Tyler the Hulk Bingham, ADX Florence became both kingdom and coffin. He returned to the same cell where the first invisible letter began. He was locked down 23 hours a day, allowed 1 hour in a concrete cage for exercise. No contact visits, no group programs, no movement without chains. Yet within those limits, his legend only grew. Younger inmates still spoke his name in whispers. They told stories about how he once ran a war from a locked cell, how a single letter from him could move killers across the map. To them, he wasn't just another convict. He was the man who turned paper into power. The government finally caged its most dangerous man, but it couldn't cage the myth. Inside those walls, Tyler Bingham remained what he had always been, the Commissioner of Death, silent and patient, watching the world through bulletproof glass while the empire he built kept breathing through the cracks of America's hardest prisons. The years after the trial faded quietly, but the myth of Tyler Bingham didn't. Inside ADX Florence, he became a shadow living within concrete, a name whispered like a curse by both inmates and guards. The same man who once commanded armies of killers now sat in a cell the size of a bathroom, eating alone, sleeping alone, and speaking only through a steel slot. Yet even locked down 23 hours a day, his legend continued to echo through the federal system like a ghost that refused to die. Federal investigators tried for years to claim victory, to say the Aryan Brotherhood was finished, but the truth was more complicated. The structure that Bingham and Mills built never truly disappeared. The commission had taught its members how to operate without faces, without meetings, without voices. Every order was coded, every instruction written in numbers, and that design made it nearly impossible to kill completely. Even with both men buried in isolation, soldiers in other prisons still spoke their names with respect and fear. Some inmates in Lewisburg and Marion started calling him the Ghost Warden, saying his influence lingered like invisible chains. In letters intercepted years later, investigators found phrases that matched his old codes. "It's a boy," and 8 pounds even kept reappearing. The content looked random, but every officer who had studied the Brotherhood knew what it meant. Someone was still using his language. The empire had adapted. For the rest of his life, Bingham stayed inside the ADX Special Control Unit. Guards described him as polite, quiet, and unshakable. He aged slowly, reading military books and studying philosophy, still fascinated by order and structure. He wrote few letters, and when he did, they contained no threats, only reflections about loyalty and power. One of the last intercepted notes he sent contained a single line: "Power isn't noise, it's discipline." That sentence summed up the philosophy he lived by. To younger gang members, he became a symbol of pure control, a man who never begged, never broke, and never apologized. To the government, he remained the face of organized death inside federal custody. Even in his old age, security teams still reviewed his mail and monitored his every word like he might still be plotting. For the Bureau of Prisons, his name meant history's lesson that even the smallest communication could spark bloodshed. When Barry Mills died in 2018 inside Florence, the story came full circle. The Red Baron was gone, leaving Bingham as one of the last surviving architects of the original commission. News of Mills's death spread fast across prison yards. Some inmates said Bingham didn't react at all, just kept reading his book like nothing had changed. Others said he paused for a long time before saying quietly, "That's one less voice in the wind." The Aryan Brotherhood eventually fractured, splitting into factions with different leadership. Some went toward money and drugs, others back to old racial ideologies. But every one of them traced their rules to the blueprint Bingham helped write. The modern Brotherhood still used his structure, the chain of command, the blood oaths, the coded messages. He had created a template for organized violence that lived longer than any one man. Outside the walls, his story turned into documentaries, books, and podcasts. Journalists called him the Commissioner of Death, the General of the Cages, and the Invisible Warlord. Each title added to his legend, but few captured who he really was. The truth was simpler and colder. Tyler Bingham wasn't a hero or a monster. He was a product of a system that bred men to rule from cages. His legacy stood as proof of how power doesn't always need freedom to exist. He showed that control could thrive even in total isolation, that violence could be managed like business, and that fear could become a kind of currency. Every coded phrase, every invisible letter, every silent order proved that sometimes the deadliest weapon a man could wield wasn't a knife or gun. It was patience. As the years passed, Bingham's world shrank to 4 walls and a slot in the door. But inside that narrow space, he held on to the one thing that had always defined him: discipline. The same discipline that built an empire of murder kept him sane in the silence. No interviews, no confessions, no apologies. Just a man sitting inside the machine he helped create. When new inmates arrived at Florence, guards sometimes told them, "That's where the commissioner lives." They didn't mean a government official. They meant the man whose invisible words once moved death through America's most secure prisons. And though decades have passed since his first coded order, his story still circles through the yards like a warning about how one man, armed with nothing but paper, order, and silence, once ruled the darkest corners of the federal system. Tyler the Hulk Bingham remains locked inside ADX Florence to this day. His eyes, still sharp even with age, look out through narrow glass toward the Colorado mountains. The empire he built has faded, but the lesson he left behind hasn't. Power built on fear always survives somewhere, even when its creator is forgotten by time. And deep inside those walls, the Commissioner of Death still sits quietly, the sound of his silence louder than any scream ever heard behind prison bars.